Sairam and welcome to this session where we are going to formally take up the discussion on the inverse of a matrix. Let us begin our session with a prayer. Om Sai Ishwaraya Vidmahe Satyadevaya Dhimahi Tanna Sarvah Prachodayat. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. The inverse of a matrix, and when we say a matrix here, we are assuming that it's a square matrix. So in this session we are only going to try and define the inverse of a square matrix. It is defined, inverse of a matrix A is defined as another matrix B, such that BA is equal to I. This is a product. If you say pre-multiply A by B, or if you post-multiply A by B, both the answers must be identity. And the most important point here is the AND, right? So whether B appears either pre-multiplying order or in the post-multiplying order, it must lead us to the identity matrix. Okay. So here is one very interesting property of inverses. Let us assume that we have got two inverses for the same matrix A. Okay, and let us try and look at this multiplication of three matrices B, A and C. Now using the associative property, the parenthesis can get shifted to BA, and we know that since B is an inverse of A, BA must go to I, right? Similarly, on the left hand side, AC must also go to I, because C is another inverse for A, and when we say inverse, even post multiplication should lead us to I, and therefore we have B into I is equal to I into C, right? That's what we see in the second equation, which means that B is equal to C, right? And what does that convey? You really cannot have two inverses for one matrix. Now looking at this, I feel like saying, which means that there will be only one inverse. But the very important statement is that we have to conclude that if I have a matrix A, I can have at most one inverse. And that's a very different statement from what we said earlier. When we said there is a matrix A, it will have only one inverse, right? It's different from it can have at most one inverse. It means that the inverse need not exist also for certain cases. Okay, so that is the next point that we are going to look at. This is another beautiful property of inverses. Let's assume that AX is equal to 0. That means I have a matrix A, I have a vector X, the matrix vector product goes to 0 vector. Okay, and we are also assuming that let X be a non-zero vector who is taking A to go to 0. Okay, if we have A inverse existing in this case, what would happen? Let's look at this property. So AX equal to 0, let's pre-multiply this by an A inverse, that will give us this equation. And what does this tell? So these two will go, and I will have here on the left hand side X, and the interesting part is this right hand side, which says that A inverse times the 0 vector will take me to the X vector, which is impossible, right? Why are we saying impossible? Try and look at a column picture of multiplication, right? So let's say A inverse has got whatever columns, but see what have we got here. We got the 0 vector, and what does the column picture of multiplication tell you? It says that every column of A is taken with a linear combination of the scalars that are coming from the 0 vector. What are the scalars in 0 vector? All of them are zeros. How is it possible for this to ever produce a X? And look at the assumption, right? The assumption was that X is non-zero, which is impossible, right? And therefore, why is this? Why are we discussing this point? The point is that there are possibilities, there are examples where A inverse need not exist. That's the conclusion. This is only one example, right? When we have AX going to 0 where X is non-zero, is only one example where we are saying that A inverse need not exist. So that's the conclusion. Inverse need not exist, but if it exists, we are calling A as invertible matrix. Okay, that's a term for us to get familiarized with. Now we are trying to see what is the inverse of a product of matrices, and this is our assumption. We are trying to see if AB inverse is given by B inverse A inverse, right? So we see that the inverses are coming in the reverse order, right? Okay, now let's try and prove this. Now how do we prove this? If we are able to prove that taking this combination and pre-multiplying with AB, we should be able to produce I, or take this combination and post-multiply with AB and we should be able to produce the matrix I. That's by the definition, right? So let's look at the post-multiplication here. So we take AB and the proposed inverse, and just applying the associative property of matrix multiplication, we can very easily see that, okay, I can shift the parenthesis, BB inverse becomes I, and we know that A into I is actually A, so A inverse will again become I, right? Similarly, do the pre-multiplication, it's a very similar fashion, change the parenthesis here and then we are in the same result, right? And what does that convey? It conveys to us that B inverse A inverse is the inverse of the product AB, right? Try and take A inverse B inverse and then try, you will not be able to get this, get the identity, right? And therefore, it's very clear that the inverses of products must come in reverse. And one more example, if I take 3, then it's going to come as C inverse, B inverse, A inverse, and you can apply it to even n matrices. Okay. Now we are going to move to try and find the inverse, right? There are a few more interesting properties, but once we do this method of finding the inverse, we could use this for proving the other properties, right? So we'll come back to properties a little later. Now there are multiple ways to find the inverse. One of the famous methods is called as Gauss-Jordan method, but first I would like to talk about how to apply what we have learned earlier, right? We have learned the LU factorization. Let's see if LU factorization can actually help us find the inverse, right? Okay, so here is our assumptions. So we are assuming that A is a square matrix. Okay, now look at the identity matrix, right? Any identity matrix, and look at the columns of identity matrix. Like if I have 1 0 0, that's one column of identity matrix. If I have 0 0 0 1 0, that's the second column of another identity matrix. 0 0 1 is another column of the identity matrix. We are looking at the 3 by 3 matrix. What I am going to denote now is, let EI stand for the ith column of I, which means that we are picking up some column from the identity matrix. And what do we understand when we pick up? Only one position somewhere is going to be 1, rest of them are going to be zeros. Now can we even fix that position? If I talk about EI, what can we talk about? Where is the 1? It will obviously be in the ith position. So if I talk about E1, it will be 1 0 0, let's say, and the first position you got 1, right? If I talk about E2, then I'll have 0 1 0, which means that it has got 1 in the second position. Okay, now we want to look at, we are interested suddenly in this equation, right? We're saying I have A, I am going to find the x such that A times this xi gives me EI. Okay, this is like a simple linear system of equations, is it not, right? Now what is interesting about finding these xi's is that the xi's will become the ith column of A inverse, and this is the most important fact. How will this happen? Okay, try and take all those xi's and then place it in a matrix and then see what will happen. Try to look at the column picture of multiplication. I have a vector here, and let's say I have the ith column of A inverse, or say some matrix. Okay, so we put all the xi's together. If I take A and take this combination, it will lead me to EI, which is the column in identity matrix. So imagine this for every single column that's coming from collection of xi's. What would that give us? The right hand side is going to be all the columns EI of this matrix. And what is that? That is nothing but I, the identity matrix. And what does that convey? So the collection of all the xi's must give us A inverse. Okay, so here is how we are picturizing or using the linear system of equations in order to think of how to get A inverse. Okay, but if we have to really get it, what does this say? It says that it's not enough if you solve one linear system of equations. We are supposed to solve n linear systems of equations. And the beautiful part of this is that the linear system of equations, the equations themselves, there is hardly going to be any change because A is not changing. But what is changing each time is the right hand side, right? So that's this very important property you're looking at. From one system to the other, only the right hand side is changing. And what's the best method when we have that? it's the LU factorization that's going to help us, right? So let us try and apply this to an example and try to build the inverse. Okay, let's say that we are given this matrix 3 by 3 matrix A, and we know how to compute L and U. We go through the elimination process. So first I have to eliminate this. So my multiplier is a 2. I get this. The next element to disappear must be this minus 2. My multiplier is a minus 1, and I get this. The next one to disappear is 8. Multiplier is a minus 1, and we are now done. We get our U matrix. We can see that this is an upper triangular matrix. In order to get a lower triangular matrix, first we fill the diagonal ones. All the top is becoming zeros. The first multiplier is here 2, after that by a minus 1, and then there is a minus 1. So I fill this up here 2, minus 1 and minus 1. Since there are no row exchanges, I really need not worry about shifting them here. This was quite clean without row exchanges. Now that we have L and U with us, let us try and solve n linear systems of equations, or in this case 3 linear systems of equations. Okay, remember how we solve. We solve first by saying let LC is equal to B, and then we will use UX equal to C, right? This comes from our knowledge of LU factorization. When you say LC is equal to B, who is the right hand side here? Remember what we discussed a little while ago. We said the right hand sides are going to come from the columns of the identity matrix, right? What are the columns of identity matrix? Here it is, right? 1 0 0 0 1 0 0 0 1 for a 3 by 3 matrix. Okay, so let's look at LC equal to B for the first vector right hand side, which is 1 0 0. Similarly, I have written down this for the others as well, right? So you see here, this is a 1 0 0. Here there is a 0. So this is a 0 1 0 and a 0 0 1. Okay, so from here I am computing the value. So C1 equal to 1. Okay, that's my value. C1 is 1. So substitute for C1 here and then find C2. That's going to be minus 2. Similarly, substitute for C1 and C2 here and then find C3. We are doing a forward substitution here. Similarly, I apply it here as well. Here as well, I found the solution. These are my solutions, which I have put them in the parenthesis to the side. Now, what is the benefit of finding this? I can now use these as the right hand side to UX equal to C, and then find my X, right? So that's what we'll do next. From those 3 systems of equations, we produce another 3 systems of equation by using our U matrix. So I written on the equations, and I have used the right hand sides. Look at this here, 1 minus 2 minus 1. You can see the right hand side here, 0 1 1. Here it is, and 0 0 1. And there it is, right? Using this, I compute the values, and here it is. So all these values, and in no time, you know what we have got? We have got the A inverse, right? And we see that LU factorization is quite helpful in order to find A inverse. Now that's not the only method. We can also find another method. So here we are verifying and seeing, and yes, we are getting the answer. I would request you to also please verify and please check whether the multiplication gives us the A inverse. Of course, here we have done only pre-multiplication. You should also check for post-multiplication, but it will definitely turn out to be the same answer. So as we are saying, this is not the only method. We can also look at another method called the Gauss-Jordan method. Gauss-Jordan method is absolutely same as elimination, but it continues the elimination. So let me put or split the Gauss-Jordan method as 2 parts, right? The first part is to apply the row operations. So apply the row operations as we are doing for elimination, but do it simultaneously to the columns of I as well, right? Not only on A, along with A, please apply the row operations also to the columns of I, right? The identity. So we're going to place A and I together and apply all row operations. Now, what does it give us at the end of this row operations? A will go to U matrix, right? We really don't know what's happening to I, but let's not worry about this at this moment. Now we see the next step, right? The first part is done. The second part of Gauss-Jordan is that continue the elimination on U, right? So we got from A to U. We will continue the elimination of U and make U to reach I, right? So you have to take U now and try to make it the identity matrix. And what is the conclusion is that transform the same elimination will continue on the columns of I which have reached to something, and when we continue, we don't know where we reach, but what is the conclusion? It says that the transformed columns of I is actually A inverse. That's what this conveys, right? So let's see if that is really true, and also try and work it out using an example. So let's pick up the same matrix A, coefficient matrix, no change from there, and I've tried to represent the identity matrix in another color. Now we are trying to put them together, right? So one part of it I have got A here, other side of it I have got I here, right? Let's do the row operations. We know the same row operations. You see here, there's a 2 here, there's a -1, and there's going to be one more which is also having a -1, right? That's here. So apply these operations, it's going to be the same. We are going to land up with the same upper triangular matrix. But what is interesting is what's happening to I, right? We transform the I by using the same row operations. Yeah, we have got something here. It is happening to be lower triangular, means we can observe it from this example. But the question is, what in essence is this matrix? Is it possible for us to relate this to something that we have learned already, right? Could this be the U? I'm sorry, could this be the L, right? So think on those lines, and maybe you could pause the video and try to check the answer for yourself. Okay, so now let me continue and then try and see what are we getting there, right? Now we had A with us, we applied different elementary row operations, the elimination technique, and in this order, right? So E1 acts on A, followed by E2, followed by E3, and we are landing up in the upper triangular matrix U. That's what we have got, right? We took the A, look at the blues, right? The blue numbers are turning out to be the U matrix, okay? At the same time, remember that we applied this on the green matrix, which is our I, and in the same order, right? So E1, E2, E3, and that gave us this matrix, okay, which I'm simply calling it as the G matrix, but we want to relate it, remember that. Okay, and since this is acting on I know for sure that I can write this as E3, E2, E1. Okay, so let's keep it like this. Does it relate to something that we have learned already? Let's see this. In LU factorization, what we learned is that we applied E3 inverse followed by E2 inverse followed by E1 inverse in the reverse, and applied to this, on the left hand side here, and all these will disappear. I will have A here. On the right hand side, I will have this written. See how we write E3 inverse, E2 inverse, E1 inverse in reverse, and times U, right? And this is the term that we wrote down as L, right? Okay. Now let's see, is there a relation that we see here, right? Look at this, E1 inverse, E2 inverse, E3 inverse is equal to L, right? That's what we got. We said here L is equal to E1 inverse, E2 inverse, and E3 inverse. Try and see what would happen for L inverse, right? Now that we know when we apply inverse to a product, it will actually reverse the order, right? And what would be L inverse? L inverse is going to be E3, E2, and E1. How did I get this? E3 inverses has got to be E3. E2 inverses has got to be E2, and so on, right? And reverse the order. That's what we get. And what do we get here? That means that it's simply not G here. It is actually L inverse, right? That's a very beautiful fact, that when we shift or transform A to U, I is getting transformed to L inverse. Okay, so let's move ahead, because we still have the second part of Gauss-Jordan to be completed. Okay, let's move ahead. What does the second part of Gauss-Jordan say? It says, please continue with your U and make it as I, right? The identity matrix. Now there is going to be a small change in our row operations. So how do I begin? First, I begin by trying to make this element 0, right? Now I want to go from down to top. So first I'm going to make this 0, then this element to 0, and try to eliminate this element. Then we will see, we will try and have only the diagonal, and maybe we could divide that and make it as identity matrix, right? That's how the procedure is going to go forward. Okay, so if I want to eliminate this guy, I'm going to use this as my pivot element, right? You can see the multiplier here, it's a -2 by 1, so it's -2. So we eliminated this, very good. After this must be this guy, so I again use this guy as the pivot, and then try 1 by 1, that's a multiplier 1. Therefore, I eliminate this element, which is first row third element, 1 3. Okay, that's gone. We still have this one element left. How do we work with this? We really can't work with this and the third row, because that's a 0 here. we are forced to work with the second row, right? So let's work with the second row. You can see the pivot is actually minus 8. So the multiplier is the element divided by this, so it's a minus 1 by 8. Here is the multiplier, and finally I apply this and I get you can see a diagonal matrix, right? Not an upper triangle or a lower triangle, but a diagonal matrix. And as we do this, the green matrix, now that we know it's L inverse, is also getting transformed. Okay, but we don't know where we're getting to. But let's try and finish this process of trying to make this the identity. So if I want to make this the identity matrix, I'm going to divide row 1 by 2 and row 2 by minus 8. So let me do this division, and finally there we are. We have got this identity matrix here. Okay, same division has happened here also, and we have got the green matrix, which is the transformation of L inverse. The question is now, what are we actually obtaining here? Okay, let's think. If A actually moved to U, and we are now discussing the second part of Gauss-Jordan, with these latest row operations, U is moving to I. If U is moving to I, what elementary row operations were done on that has made it go to I, which means effectively this thing has got pre-multiplied by some elementary row matrices, like say E1, or maybe we should call it now say E4, E5, E6, etc., which have got it to I. In a sense, it has got pre-multiplied by U inverse, is it not? If it was U inverse, multiplying that with U has got me the I. That means the same thing should have got applied to L inverse as well, and therefore what is that we are getting here? We are actually getting here U inverse L inverse, right? And what does that tell us, right? If we know that A is equal to LU, what is U inverse L inverse? That's got to be A inverse. We got it, right? And that is why Gauss-Jordan method works, right? So please go and take a look at this matrix in green and verify if that is same as the one that we applied direct LU factorization and got a little earlier before, right? So we got that answer. You can please verify that answer with this one, and it's pretty sure that they have got to be the same, right? So here is an important fact why Gauss-Jordan works. Okay, let's move ahead and try and prove one or two more interesting properties of an inverse of a matrix using this technique that we have just learnt. Okay, so here is the next property that we would like to prove. We are saying that if A has got n pivots, then A is invertible, right? We are trying to prove this, saying assumption is I have n pivots and I have to prove that A is invertible, which means A inverse exists. Okay, let's move. We are going to use the Gauss-Jordan method as we just learned. We are saying that we will start for finding the inverse by applying the Gauss-Jordan method, which is nothing but elementary row operations, right? Remember what we did? We had A, we applied, say in this case of 3 by 3, we applied 3 elementary operations and we got it to U, and applied few more with the division operation and then got to I, right? Similarly, we started with I simultaneously, applied the same in the same sequence and order, got into L inverse, and we got here to this B, right? We know what is B by now, but let's assume that we will just call it for now as B, because we don't know whether inverse is existing or not, right? Okay, now when we actually write proof, we should not be talking about E1, E2, E3, but since we just finished this example, I thought it will be easier for you to relate when I say E1, E2, E3. But in a general sense, please understand that if I talk about AN, right, if it is an n dimensional or n by n matrix, we should talk about a sequence of row operations. If you want to call it E1 to En, that's much more general than writing E1 to E3. Okay, so let's continue, because I am trying to relate this to the example which we did recently. So what we are getting is that this final product B is obtained by pre-multiplying the EI's, right? Which means if I had I here, right? Remember that we started with I, landing up at B. So let me try and apply this to the let's try and apply this to the identity matrix. So I have the identity matrix, the same order, right? First acted on by E1, E2, E3, followed by E4, E5, E6, then the D, right? So I write that in this order. All these products, product of these matrices times I is going to give me B, right? So let's keep that one side. Look at this, similar operation here on A is giving me I, right? So let's multiply this all these together with I. I mean, since this is just the identity matrix, this entire thing I can say this entire product is equal to B, right? And therefore I can replace this with B. So what do I get? B times A is going to give me I. Okay, and what does that tell me? It says that B is a pre-multiplied matrix to A gives me I. In a sense, I can call it the left inverse. Oh, brilliant. But is it just the left inverse? Could that be also the right inverse? Let's try, right? Let's consider this sequence of product here, which is B times A into B. And now I can using the associative property, I can put a parenthesis here. I can also put the parenthesis here, right? Okay. Now, remember that this is my left hand side of the equation. Let me try and work it out for the right hand side. This is my left hand side of the equation. What it says is this entire product is BA times B, and I know since we just proved that BA is equal to I can replace that by I, and that becomes as I into B, which is equal to B. So what I have got is B times this entire product, B times AB is giving me B, right? That's what we got. B times AB is B. What does that convey? It says that AB has got to be I. Oh, what does that convey? It means that B is the right inverse as well, and we have proved it. We got it that B is our A inverse, right? So what did we happen to prove? We assume that if A has got n pivots, then A has become invertible, which means that A inverse exists. Now, where did we use this fact of n pivots? We are using this fact of n pivots because all this is happening successfully. The process of elimination did not fail at any point. That's the key assumption. In case we did not have a pivot, remember that elimination could have failed somewhere, and we wouldn't have been able to reach to U here, and we would have said that elimination has failed. Maybe we can't proceed with elimination. But since we are assuming that elimination we are able to proceed till U and then going ahead, it means that inherently we are assuming that we have got n pivots, right? So that's the very important and critical fact that we are using, saying that this process is completing. Let's prove the other half of it, where we are trying to say that if A is invertible, is it possible to say that A has got n pivots? We are trying to prove the opposite. Now the strategy in this method is to prove it by contradiction. So what we are assuming is that let us try and use elimination on A such that it reaches this state, right? Which means we are assuming that we started off the elimination procedure and somewhere I don't have a pivot. And if you're able to say that this cannot happen when A is invertible, it means that we have contradicted this our assumption. So our assumption is, let me take elimination procedure on A and continue, and let's assume that it reaches some state like this where we do not have a certain pivot, and we are going to prove saying that this cannot happen, which means that A will have n pivots, right? So that's the strategy of this proof. So we are saying let's assume that there is no third pivot. Okay, great. And when we say there is no third pivot, remember that it's not like I have a non-zero element here so that I can exchange the rows and thereby get a third pivot. When we say there is no third pivot, there is absolutely no third pivot. There is no chance of even row exchange trying to bring in a third pivot. If there is a chance, then elimination would have continued, is it not? Right? So we are coming to a point by saying that there is no third pivot, and what do I do? Also understand when we write here x, right, it is not that all these are same values, right? All these could be very different values, and this is an important point here. Let them be having any values. We are not bothered, right? We are only bothered about two pivots we have got, and let's assume third pivot is not there. Okay. Now, if the Gauss-Jordan method has to proceed and try to bring the I from U, is it possible or not? That's the question we are asking, right? We are trying to get an upper triangle matrix here. Yeah, it is seemingly looking upper triangular when all the elements below the diagonal have gone to 0. Is it possible for us to continue from here? That's what Gauss-Jordan is going to do, right? Let's continue from here and try to make this as the identity matrix. Let's really try. Remember the method that we attempted. We said if we have to make this into identity matrix, first we will try and eliminate a specific element, right? For example, we may try to eliminate this x. Okay, let's try and eliminate this x here. If we try to eliminate, I can use this as the pivot and I could eliminate this. Great. Okay, but when we eliminate this, remember that this will continue to be 0. Okay, that continues to be 0 because I have got a 0 here. Okay, since we have got this to be 0 now, what happens to the third row? The third row is a complete row of zeros. Okay, so what? Try and make this 1. Is it possible to make this 1? Because remember that we have to bring up the identity matrix. If you have to have an identity matrix here in this column, I have to make this 1. Yeah, we may eliminate other things, but how do I make this 1 when I have a complete row of zeros? So think about that. Even if you say, so let me try and do something with this guy here, assuming this is non-zero, and bring up something here. But when you do that, this also will become non-zero, right? And this game will go on, right? Moment you have this, it's going to become really difficult in order to bring up the 1 here. Also, it is going to become very difficult to eliminate these elements as well, because or say these elements, because you don't have this 1 here, and therefore we could say that Gauss-Jordan method in the elimination process will fail, right? It is impossible to get a 1 using any row operation, right? And therefore it shows that when we do not have this, A inverse does not exist. But our assumption is A is invertible, which means that it's a contradiction, right? It's a contradiction to say that if A has got during the elimination procedure, if one of the pivots is not there, that's not possible, right? And therefore we say that if this implies that if A is invertible, A has to have n pivots only. Since we have proved the for and the opposite, what can we conclude? We can conclude that A is invertible if and only if it has got n pivots, right? So that's a very interesting property, and there are several properties we learnt, and this is one of the last properties we are trying to look at for the inverse, right? So we'll conclude this session by understanding that in this we just looked at a few interesting properties of A inverse or inverse of a matrix, and we also looked at 2 different methods in order to find the inverse. One was using LU factorization and the other was using the Gauss-Jordan technique. So let's conclude this session with a prayer. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.